Hello everyone, and welcome to a special video on this channel. The PTS patch notes just dropped, so we're going to be looking at those with a special focus on the new Overland crafted and a bit of a look at the trial sets, though that's really not my channel's forte. And we'll talk about what I think is good, what I think is bad, and just sort of go over all of these new toys that we're getting. So we'll start with our Overland sets, and specifically this one here, Frostbite. Two items gives spell damage, 3 items gives spell critical, 4 items give spell damage, and at 5 items, it increases the damage done with frost abilities by 6%, increases the damage done against chilled enemies by 4%, and increases the damage done against enemies afflicted with minor brittle by 2%. Honestly, I think this is just a better Ysgramor. Because there's a set called Ysgramor's Birthright, and I really should have had this ready in another tab. Can you tell I am not at all prepared to be doing this? So one of our existing Overland sets from, I want to say, the Rift, is called Ysgramor's Birthright. Here it is. Yep, Rift. Which adds 400 spell damage to your frost damage abilities, which isn't terrible, and spell crit, max magicka, and spell damage are all good stats. But the thing about Frostbite is, it's a flat damage increase to your frost damage abilities, and then increases your damage done against chilled enemies by 4%. So that's roughly a grand total if you're dealing mostly frost damage. That is a grand total of 10% damage bonus, and it goes up to 12 if you can consistently afflict minor brittle, which you should be able to do, and honestly your tank should be doing already. Because minor brittle is just bonus crit damage, and we all want bonus crit damage. So I don't think this is a bad set, I just think it's one of those sets that has a very specific build in mind. And if you can build around that set, then you can work with it. If you deal basically all frost damage, and you're dealing damage and you're getting chilled off and you're getting brittle off, then yeah, I could see this being a good set. The problem is having all of that line up. Because if you don't have that lining up, then this is probably worse for you than Ysgramor's Birthright. It's more interesting, and it's cooler, and these last 2 sentences are going to be common enough if you've got a tank running an ice staff, or if you're running an ice staff, that it shouldn't be a problem, especially if you run one of them with charged. But the thing is, you're not going to have that be outpacing something like Law of Julianos, or I don't know. Honestly, I think this might be outpaced by something like Crafty Elfique, which is another set that we need to talk about sometime in the future. And why just a crap ton of max magicka is actually just good for your damage. Anyways, moving along to our next one, we have Deadlands Assassin. This is our medium Overland set for this patch. 2 items is 129 weapon damage, 3 items is 129 weapon damage, 4 items is 1096 max stamina, 5 items is 200 weapon damage, and dealing damage to an enemy within 10 meters of you with a heavy attack causes you to throw a cone of knives, dealing physical damage to enemies hit. If an enemy hit has 50% or less health, they take an additional bleed damage over 13 seconds and scales off of your highest of your weapon or spell damage. And because the physical and bleed damage values scale off of that, they're not included here. This is a super cool set to me. And I want it to be good. I want this set to be fun. Again, I don't think this will actually be a super good set. I think it's one of those like really fun niche sets to run on like a heavy attack Stam Dragon Knight, because that's a thing we can do with two-handers. So, with, like, Sergeant's Mail, weapons, and jewelry. I think there is a place for this set. I don't think it is a mainstream set, but I think there is definitely a place to run this set, and I think it will be fun to see. And finally, for Overland, we have the set Bog Rider. At 2, it gives max magicka, at 3, max health, at 4, max stamina, so all good things for your tank, and at 5, when an enemy you have recently damaged dies, gain 10 ultimate and increase your health recovery by 1,156 for 10 seconds. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds. Okay. Hey tanks, do you miss Deadwater's Guile? Do you miss the old Deadwater's Guile? Here's a new one. Okay, this is interesting. So let's talk about what this is good for. First off, it's recently damaged and not killed. Deadwater's Guile. Here it is. Whenever you kill an enemy, you gain 15 ultimate. This used to work as whenever an enemy you recently damaged dies, but it is now whenever you kill an enemy. So, whenever an enemy is killed by you, you get 15 if it's Deadwater's, and that only works if you get the finishing blow. Bog Raider here, whenever an enemy you have recently damaged dies, you get 10, and this can only occur every 10 seconds, but that's still every 10 seconds, more or less, especially during ad pulls, it's a burst of 10 ultimate, and a massive amount of health recovery. This actually is probably going to make my list for, like, decent sets to throw onto a tank. Because that is actually a really good thing if you can keep up your, like, blockade of elements on your tank. Because if they're sitting in your frost blockade, and then they die, you have recently damaged them and get a massive buttload of health recovery. For comparison, one of the sets that we're probably going to talk about when we do a monster set month on Healer is Troll King. And Troll King gives 925 health recovery, and this is a pretty darn good monster set. Like, it's not the super high end. There's a reason I don't end up using it in the background as much. And more accurately, there's a reason why basically every healer video that's come out has Symphony of Blades as the monster set. But this is good. Both of these things are good. And you can basically proc it on cooldown if you're lucky. This may be a at least decent set, and if you're more ultimates on tank means more Warhorns, or more Kolos, or more barriers, or more what have yous. This is useful. This is very useful. I think this might actually be the best of the Overland sets here, and this might be something worth picking up as a alternative option to, like, Drake's Rush or Arcasis on a tank. It's a more selfish one, sure, but I think it's a decent option. Alright, and so, all in all, for our Overland sets, Frostbite feels very situational, and I don't know if it's good enough. Deadlands Assassin looks awesome, and I want this set to be good. This is, I think, my favorite set that they have shown. Not because I think it's going to be good, but because I think it looks like fun. You cannot tell me that heavy attacking and throw a cone of knives does not sound like a rip-roaring good time. And Bog Raider is the least, like, mechanically flashy of them. Like, all of these stacking percent numbers on Frostbite are interesting, and Deadlands Assassin is a proc set that throws a cone of knives that deals damage based on your weapon or spell damage, and can cause a bleed if they're at low health, which is awesome. And then we have Bog Raider, which just gives you a buff when an enemy you recently damaged dies. I think that this is, well, not being the flashiest set, this might actually be the most powerful of our Overlands. Especially in newer groups where the tank isn't as sure as to what they're doing. My recommended tank setup might actually end up becoming Seducer Bog Raider. Because it's an Overland set, so it's not hard to get at all. It's probably not going to be that expensive on guild stores. And, it seems good. You can get, weapons and jewelry of this probably pretty easy. And then get Crafted Seducer. And pick up, a Sentinel, maybe, or something like that for your head. And that's a pretty good, easy tank startup. Maybe replace Seducer with Eben if you feel like going that route. But I do think Bog Raider is going to be good. I think this is definitely worth talking about. And I think that it's definitely up there. Alright, now let's move on to our crafted sets. So first off, we have Hist Whisperer. Adds 129 health recovery at 2, 3 gives stamina recovery, and 4 gives magicka recovery. And finally, at 5, dealing damage with a light or medium attack, heals you for 300 health and restores 300 stamina and magicka. Dealing damage with a fully charged heavy attack, heals for 600 health and restores 600 stamina and magicka. You know what? This might actually also make the list for, good starter tank sets. I don't know if it quite beats out Seducer, but this is another really good option if you don't want to just run Seducer. Because light attacks giving you 316 stamina and magicka, that's really good for your sustain. And the health recovery and the mag recovery are both things we want on a tank. Stam recovery is a little bit less useful. It's not entirely useless, but it's just not as important to us. We prefer to have max stamina or just health recovery and magicka recovery, or max health and max magicka. Sometimes armor's good. But all in all, good 2 and 4, decent 3. And light attacks, restoring resources, and more resources restored on heavies is probably going to be a very interesting thing to try out as a beginner tank. I think Hist Whisperer might be a good recommendation for something to craft for newer players. Now, depending on how many traits it costs, this seems like the low trait set from this area. Because if I'm looking at the other two, I feel like Heartland's Conqueror is going to be 6, and Diamond's Victory is going to be 6 or 8, and Hist is going to be 3. None of those are set in stone yet, and this is me spitballing. But I do think that they are definitely both up there, and that Hist Whisper is going to be the easy one to craft, and therefore going to be even better for newer players. Speaking of those other two, let's move on. Heartland's Conqueror. 2 items add weapon and spell damage, 3 items adds max magicka, 4 items adds max stamina. At 5 items, increase the effectiveness of your weapons traits by 100%. This does not affect ornate and intricate. Shields are also not affected by Heartland's Conqueror as they use armor traits. Okay, so this is... I'm not sure how to feel about this one. So, to understand this, we have to look at traits. Did I talk about traits here? Here we are. Traits. So, traits list. This was helpful. This is very helpful. So looking at weapon traits, so, for example, if you have 2 precise weapons At Legendary, you get 3.6, or 6.1 if both of your weapons, or you have a two-handed weapon like a staff or a greatsword or a bow, in Legendary with Precise. So this is 6.1 crit. Heartland's Conqueror makes that 12.2%, which is interesting, but that does not feel like a good 5-piece set. It's a cool effect, and I love the effect, and there are some really fun ones to mess with that with, like Nirnhoned to increase your weapon damage by a total of 30%. That seems fun. Reduce enchantment cooldown and increase weapon enchant by 30%. Or by 60%. Increase total physical and spell resist by a ton. That one's less interesting, actually. Increase XP... Oh! I think we found it. Increased XP gain. We can get way more XP. So, a lot of times, we make our trading sets epic, because the 10%'s good enough. So we make a 5-piece training set, and of Heartlands, and a 5-piece training set of Hundings or Law or something like that, and then we can get 16% more XP, which is 8% more than we already could. That's very interesting. That might actually be the thing that Heartlands is good for. I don't know, though. I don't think this is an endgame set. I don't even think this is I'm farming out other sets. I think this is beaten by Hunding's Rage and a lot of other sets. But it's a very interesting ability, and I like that they're putting this out there and that they're putting it in the game. I just don't think that it's the most powerful. And finally, we have crafted set number 3, Diamond's Victory. Which, can I just say, that's an awesome name. And if this is not at the site, if we're going to a place, I don't remember exactly the name of it, but somewhere in the nearby regions is the place where Riemann won his battle against the Akaviri invaders. And if this is not at that place, I'm going to be very annoyed with the name. So, 2 items gives weapon and spell damage, 3 items gives crit chance, and worth remembering that is both weapon and spell critical. 4 items gives weapon and spell damage, and at 5, dealing direct melee damage grants you range supremacy for 5 seconds, adding 437 weapon and spell damage to your damage over time and ranged attacks. Dealing direct ranged damage grants you melee supremacy for 5 seconds, adding 437 weapon and spell damage to your melee attacks. Okay. So, let's think about this for a second. First off, weapon damage, crit chance, crit chance, damage isn't that interesting. I mean, it's good stuff, but there's not a ton to talk about there. That 5 is really interesting, though, and it's probably going to be tweaked a bit. Maybe with some numbers and maybe with some balancing to make sure it actually triggers. We don't know yet. Wouldn't be surprised if either of those were the case. But direct melee damage and direct ranged damage. So here's what I'm thinking when I look at this. I'm thinking about, as a STAM DPS, because I'm assuming we're not making, or possibly as a Dragon Knight, direct ranged damage is not that hard to come by if our back bar is a bow, or on a Dragon Knight with our staffs. Because those light attacks from that bow are considered direct ranged damage. Which means that we can come by that pretty easy. which gives us melee supremacy to give weapon and spell damage to our melee attacks. So then, we switch to our front bar, and Lava Whip, which, if I remember right, is a melee ability. Skills. Is this melee range? Maximum range 5 meters. I think this counts as melee. So I think that will give you the range supremacy, which gives weapon and spell damage to your damage over time and ranged attacks. So on a stam DPS, that gives all of our dots things like Endless Hail / Volley, or Caltrops, or... What other dots do stam have? Can you tell I don't play as many stam characters? Or class-based dots like, Standard of Might, or Venomous Claw, or Noxious Breath on Dragon Knights, or the, or bleeds that we're doing, stuff like that. That's increased by our ranged supremacy stacks, as are any ranged attacks. And remember, direct melee damage can be sourced from our light attacks on our front bar, and directed ranged damage can be sourced from our light attacks on our back bar. So we can have a stack of these basic of whichever one we want every 5 seconds, as long as we're willing to switch. Now, do I think that we're going to get the melee supremacy as much? Not really, no. I think we're mostly trying to to get this ranged supremacy buff for that 430 weapon damage to our dots and ranged attacks. But, if memory serves, and I might be completely wrong with this, but if memory serves, that should increase the damage of our volley and caltrops and whatever else we're running on our back bar for those sorts of things while they're still going on. I'm not positive about that, though, so don't quote me on it. But I think Diamond's Victory is an interesting choice. I don't know that, again, I don't entirely know that it's a great choice, but it is certainly interesting. And I look forward to playing with it. Because it's a crafted set, I will almost certainly be able to play with Diamond's Victory. Alright, and now let's look at the trial sets. These will probably never get videos on my channel. Not unless I am literally out of other sets that I think are worth talking about. Because the channel is for easier to acquire sets. So trials are kind of low on my priority list. So, let's start with Boss Size Mania. 2 items is spell damage, 3 items is minor slayer, 4 items is spell damage. Perfected version adds another stack of spell damage, and increases your damage. And at 5, increase your damage done to non-player enemies by up to 15% based on your missing magicka. How many characters do you have that on their magicka? How many magicka DPS do you have that try and sit around 30% max magicka? Or tend to sit around 30% max magicka in prolonged fights? I know I have a couple. And that's probably because I'm bad at the game. But this could prove to be some pretty decent damage, all things considered. I'll have to think about this. I don't know entirely how I feel about this. I'm going to have to play with it a bit in PTS when that drops. see where the breakpoint for that 15 is on your max magicka, because if it's low, then that could prove very good. If it's high, then less so. Or if it's really low, that could be kind of bad, because something that we'll talk about in a couple of weeks with the Pearls of Elnefay is how hard it is to sit at that level. And depending on... And I wish it had, like, a percent number of how much missing magicka increased your damage and all of that. Because otherwise... Because I want to know that before I give too much of an opinion. I think it could be good, but I don't think it's consistent enough, is going to be my short answer here. Alright, now let's look at Stonetaker's Oath. This is a light set, and because the other light set was a DPS set, we know that this is meant to be a healer set, because that's how they code trials. Stonetaker's Oath. At 2 items, 129 magicka recovery. At 3 items, gain minor Aegis. At 4 items, gain magicka recovery. Perfected version gives maximum magicka. Ooh, nice. And at 5, your fully charged heavy attacks place a soul bomb on your target that charges as the target takes damage. After 10 seconds, the bomb explodes, restoring 5% of the damage received as stamina and magicka up to 240 stamina and magicka to 12 group members within 16 meters of the explosion. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds. That is... Oh, that's interesting. This might be our new Holofang, guys. This might be a trial gear Holofang. Because here's the thing. It's not the best of both worlds that Holofang is. Because we'll talk about this later, at some point, when talking about, like, what is meta and why the meta is what it is. But Holofang is used because it's the best of both worlds between sustain and healing buffs. Because it gives a bonus to your healing received, and it gives a bonus to your magicka recovery. Holofang Thirst. So, whenever you critically heal or critically damage, spawn a ball of hemoglobin at that location. After 2 seconds, the ball explodes, restoring 2,527 magicka and applying minor vitality to you and your group members within 6 meters of the ball for 9 seconds, increasing their healing received by 8%. This effect can occur once every 9 seconds. So, comparing that to Stonetaker's Oath. First off, if you're in a mixed group or a stamina group, this is 100% just a better Holofang for you. Granted, I can't say what you're running in a stam group because I don't run in a stam group. My current group is more mixed. So I want this. I think this will be a good addition to our set pool as healers. It is somewhat reliant on heavy attacking the right person when it's on cooldown. But I think that's fine. I think that this is, still a good set. And I don't know, I think it's worth running. So yeah, Stonetaker's Oath. Pretty good healer set. Solazon's Torment, medium. Weapon damage, Minor Slayer, Weapon Critical. Perfected gives another stack of Weapon Critical. And at 5, when an enemy you recently damaged dies, they leave behind a Vengeful Soul for 6 seconds. You can only create 1 Vengeful Soul at a time. Dang it, that's boring. Touching a soul increases your Weapon Critical by 2,160 and your crit damage by 12% for 30 seconds. Alright. Major Brutality. I have to remember a skill that grants it. Sork has one. Oh, I don't want brutality and sorcery. I want, oh, I know where to find it. Set. Skills Guild. Mages. Because we're assuming that everyone is Magicka until proven otherwise. Spell crit. So, Major Prophecy and, I'm forgetting the name of the other one, but the named buff for critical, Major Prophecy and Major Savagery, is 2,629. This is essentially an additional version of that stacked on top, and 12% crit damage. I don't think this is a bad set at all. I think especially combining this with a more crit-focused set, or maybe just running this as your crit set, alongside Reliquin, could be some pretty good DPS. Again, it's something to test, and I don't play a lot of high-level DPS. I'm mostly a support player. But I think this could prove to be an interesting set. And now, onto the Heavies trial set, Saxhleel Champion. At 2 items, 1,096 max Magicka, 3 items is minor Aegis, 4 items is max stamina, 5 items, the perfected version gives max stamina as well, and when you cast an ultimate ability, you and up to 11 other group members within 28 meters of you gain major force for 21 seconds, increasing your critical damage done by 20%. This effect can occur once every 30 seconds. This is another one of those skills that I don't know how to feel about. Because, this skill, Aggressive Horn, I need to look at crit damage, okay, gives you, your group, 10% more max Magicka and stamina, and major force. And this is run by basically every tank. And it's really hard to argue for dropping Warhorn. Now, I think there is a very specific case to use Saxhleel Champion on a tank. And it's very specific, and I don't think it's going to be very common, but I think there is a reason to use this. And it involves 1 class and 1 ultimate. And there are probably people in the audience who just went, oh yeah, I know exactly where you're going. This lets you get the Warhorn. This lets you get at least half of the Warhorn buff off when you colo. Which, if you're in charge, if you need to be doing Colossi because you don't have enough Necros in the party to keep it on cooldown anyways, then I think this is a decent set because at least then you're still getting that minor force. I also think that it's a longer duration of major force, not minor force. Your DPS are already giving themselves minor force. Because this is 10 seconds, brought up to, I want to say 14, if it's on a healer with Yorvalds, which isn't all that common, but it's worth mentioning. While this is 21. So I think that this is interesting, at least, on a Necro tank that's running Colossus, one of these 2 morphs. I don't actually know which morph of this you take on a tank, because half the time your tank will deal more damage with Magicka, and half the time they'll deal more damage with stamina, and it really, really doesn't matter. One of them will work. But I think this is good for if you need to be running Colo on tank. I think you're basically getting more of the buff that you're missing out, that you're not able to give. Or if you need to push... Or if you're needing to push through with a barrier rotation, this gives you a little bit more damage when you're doing that. All in all, I think it's an okay set. I don't think this is I don't think this is much of a game changer. I think it's just a nice extra utility to have available. And finally, Mythic Items. We're getting 4 this time, which is exciting to me. Because the 2 we got last time are the 2 best Mythic Items in the game, in my opinion. And so we're getting new ones, and they look to be pretty much just as good. Alright, Gaze of Sithis, Heavy Headpiece. Maximum health recovery, 1,760 armor, and reduce your block mitigation to 0. Okay, we need to talk about this for a moment. First off, that's a pretty good amount of maximum health, especially considering they're lowering the amount of max health that we're getting as well during this, which I'll touch on that in a little bit, but that's less important to what we're talking about here. And health recovery, 500 health recovery is a lot of health recovery. You might be able to put this on a DPS instead of Ring of Pale Order between those 2 things and have about the same survivability. Maybe not quite as much, but that's still a lot. Something the old Elysian Order werewolf build. Actually, this plus Elysian Order could prove very fun because of this stat. So armor is your physical, adds to both physical and spell resist, and this is a pretty big amount of armor. 1,760. That is a third of the armor cap. So for those of you who don't know, your armor score, your physical and spell resistance score, don't really matter once they exceed around... or cap at the amount of damage you can reduce at about 33k. So this is about a third of your maximum thing. And that, plus the fact that it is a mythic item in heavy, means that throwing this on like a Magicka DPS can give you a metric buttload more survivability than you had, especially considering the max health and health recovery. And the fact that it no longer costs you to block, assuming I'm remembering what block mitigation is, which I'm probably misremembering. Alright. Okay, so the block mitigation is the amount that you block. So, I think that this, and this is something I'll have to test, because I don't understand if this is the downside or an upside, and I'm not sure which idea I like more. But if this reduces all damage that you can block, that's insanely strong. And if it doesn't, if this means that you no longer block any damage, then this is still a pretty good set for like DPS as a possibility outside of Ring of the Pale Order. Which again, I think is a very interesting option to give us. I just don't know how I quite feel about it yet. So yes, Gaze of Sithis is going to prove to be interesting, and I don't know whether or not I like it. We'll see. I'm going to have to play with that when it comes out. Harpooner's Wading Kilt. Dealing direct damage grants you a stack of Hunter's Focus for 1 minute, up to 10 stacks maximum. You can only gain 1 stack of focus per second. Each stack increases your critical chance by 119 and your crit damage by 2%. Taking direct damage removes 1 stack. Removing the item removes all stacks of Hunter's Focus. So doing the math here quick. So we have 10 stacks, and each stack is 119. That's 1,190, which, if memory serves, is about 10% crit-ish. And our critical damage is increased by 20% at maximum stacks. And as long as we don't take a direct damage ability, we can just keep stacking that over and over and over. I think this is our medium armor version of Thracian. I think this makes the cut. I think I would be willing to drop a monster set on a Stam DPS for Harpooner's Wading Kilt. I think it's just good enough for that. Because that's a lot of crit. And a lot of crit damage. Combine that with Reliquin, One Piece, like Dama House, or something else that gives max stam, and then what's it called? Something like Leviathan or Kinraz, and you've got yourself a pretty nasty setup. I think Harpooner's Wading Kit might just make the cut these days. Death Dealer's Fete. I have no idea what this word means. What does this word mean? Celebration. So, celebrating death dealing. Gain a persistent stack of escalating fate with every 2 seconds you are in combat, up to 10 stacks maximum. Each stack increases your max stamina, health, and magicka by 150. You lose a stack every 4 seconds you're out of combat. Okay, let's talk about this for a moment. Game, we need to stop making these rings. Why are the rings always the best mythic item? Why are the rings always the best mythic item, guys? Okay, so. Persistent stack of escalating Fete every 2 seconds you're in combat, up to 10 stacks. So, as long as the combat lasts 20 seconds, which is basically guaranteed on a lot of the bosses, especially in higher level content, and even some of the trash pulls in higher level content, depending on how things are going, you get so each stack, you get 15,000, or 1,500, not 15,000, what are you thinking? 1,500 max stamina, health, and magicka. That's a lot. That's a really good amount of bonus damage. And you don't have to do anything, you just have to be fighting. That's definitely not a downside at all. That's just kind of consistently good. That might actually beat out Wading Kit. Maybe even Gaze of Sithis. That's really good. I'm curious as to what it takes to earn this one, because it kind of feels like it should be hard. And finally, we have Shapeshifter's Chain, which is a necklace that reduces the cost of your transformation ultimate abilities by 15%. Well transformed, increase your maximum health, stamina, and magicka by 1,216. Comment is this applies to Werewolf Transformation, Blood Scion, and Bone Goliath. Huh. You know, I was going to make a comment about doing the old Elysian Order werewolf with Gaze of Sithis. But maybe we do it with Shapeshifter's Chain. And just have a ton of extra and just have more extra and just get more resources and get werewolf more often. This is, I think, our niche one. This is our, oh, this seems fun and I want to mess with it. So yeah, Shapeshifter's Chain. Seems pretty good. Seems like fun. Seems like some nice new toy to have. We'll have to see how this feels. I don't think that this makes the cut half the time, because I think unless you're relying on your werewolf, this might actually be decent for the PvP werewolf builds. Because they do this sort of thing more often. So yeah, we'll have to see about that. And then new antiquities. Gonna have to pick that up because I have a character that's Zen focused. And somewhere down here they talk about combat and gameplay. They changed a lot of skills and such. The big ones are these dealing bleed. So the following abilities now deal purely bleed rather than a physical or a mix of physical and bleed. Bloodthirst, which is the flurry morph that heals you for hits back, is now a pure bleed skill. Carve is now, which is the other morph for the AO. I'm forgetting names. Combat and gear, weapon skills, two-handed. It's the other morph for brawler, the cleave skill. So this now deals only bleed damage. Cutting Dive, which is the stamina morph for the Warden spammable dive, now deals only bleed damage. Pounce and its morphs, which is the werewolf jump ability. So these three will now all deal full bleed damage, which makes me wonder about Automaton as a werewolf. That's something that I need to look into. Anyways, Trap Beast and its morphs will now deal bleed, which is cool, and Twin Slashes and its morphs will now only deal bleed. That, I think, is the big one. Because that means that dual wields, that two of the really common attacks for dual wield, Bloodthirst, this tends to be a pretty common one. I don't think it's quite as good as Rapid Strikes, but I think it's certainly up there. This is, I think, a little bit better for solo play, and if we have more things increase, and because bleed is now our stamina version of burn, I think that might actually push Bloodthirst over the edge to being the better morph. Because Bloodthirst, even though it doesn't have that increasing damage, Bloodthirst will now have a chance to proc bleeding, or to proc hemorrhaging, which is huge. That said, I think Blood Craze might actually beat that out, just because Blood Craze is a dot that we can apply and then forget instead of losing more damage on our spammable. That's worth thinking about, though. Those are all really interesting. And I think this list is going to prove interesting in the future. These have some interesting connotations, but they basically reduced the amount of AoE and which apparently will improve response time. Battle Spirit passive now also reduces your health recovery. Okay. Minor Lifesteal and Magicka Steel, both of these effects have been received significant back-end adjustments to how they operate, fixing most cases of the caster with the effect of changed context. They are now considered to be sourced from the caster. Oh, this is huge, actually. This is huge. Minor Lifesteal and Magicka Steel are now considered to be sourced from the caster rather than the target, which means that things like Blood Altar count. That Magicka Steel, so things like your weakness that your Elemental Drain now counts as your healer giving you those resources, which could proc specific sets. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but that opens a design space for that. And the big thing is, Lifesteal, if you are applying Lifesteal as either a tank or a healer, that counts as you healing them, which is huge. This puts Symphony back on the map for tanks, and it makes it even better. Because here's the thing. If I'm the one doing the healing with a minor lifesteal, because healing done is from the target, from the caster, and taken is from the triggerer, crit chance and bonuses from the trigger, and it will not Can you do not proc effect events such as healing caused? This makes me sad, because this is the only reason I got excited about this change. So this means that we'll get a little bit more healing out of Lifesteal, and maybe a little bit more Magicka out of Magicka Steel. I think this means it still doesn't work for sets like Spell Power Cure or Symphony of Blades or Sentinel or any of those. Which is sad, but hey, what can you do? Couple of sad things here. Molten armaments got fixed. Coagulated blood. Boneyard deal is now lasts 10 seconds and now heals the synergy activator rather than the caster. Death Kneel got murdered. This used to be... This, in the current patch, can give you like 80 to 90% crit in the execute phase, so you can just constantly be critting when their boss is low and just get a ton of bonus damage, and now it's only giving 2 to 4% instead of 5 to 10, which is sad, but oh well. Bone Totem results in the same values, but with less decimals. Agony Totem now has a 6-person target cap for the synergy. Oh. And the final tick of the damage was not amplified by its own major vuln, so that's apparently fixed now. Damage can also cause hit reactions, no longer causes hit reactions despite being damaged over time. Shadow Cloak heals for less. Negate Magic now takes 1 second, and potency is increased to ensure the DPS and healing per second remains about the same. Scrolling combat text now properly displays successful silences with these abilities. Bolt Escape, a couple of changes to that. This is a PvP thing for more or less both of these. The healing morph of Negate Magic can be a PvE thing, but for the most part, this is PvP focused, which is why that's important. Because silencing Magicka enemies is good. Mage's Fury, fixed an issue with the execute component of this ability in its morphs for mixing rank up progress. That's nice. Luminous Shards now restores full resources for the Magicka and stamina granted, rather than half of the off-stat. That's big, actually. This is really nice for Templars, and for Templar healers specifically. And more specifically, actually, for your tank. Because that's a lot of resource gained. Dawn's Wrath, Living Dark. I don't know what Living Dark does. I don't know enough Templar stuff. Dawn's Wrath. Living Dark. Envelop yourself in a lightless sphere for 4 seconds to protect yourself. Anytime an enemy uses a direct damage attack against you, the sphere lashes back, reducing their movement speed for 3 seconds and healing you. This effect can occur once every half second, and now scales off of your max health or spell damage. That's interesting. I don't know that I like it, but... Stuns enemies for 3 seconds. Target cap for the... Move the target cap for the damage, major mayhem, and synergy damage plus stun on all versions of Nova. Templar... Was Templar not good enough for you, Zoss? Was Templar not already good? Is that why you're buffing it? Issue where major mayhem was applied twice. That's funny. Synergy from this morph, Gravity Crush, now has proper radius of 8 meters. And increase the damage from the Solar Prison morph. Solar Disturbance reduces the base cost. Ultimate now ranks up in duration of the major mayhem rather than the damage done. Now lasts 7 seconds at base and ranks up to 10 rather than 4 seconds at all ranks. So I want to say Prison for this is the one that gives... Yeah, so Disturbance is the PvP one where the mayhem stays on enemies. And Solar Prison is... gives more damage and a longer stun. So this is the PvE morph, this is the PvP morph. Still both very good. Cleansing Ritual, this ability and its morphs no longer require you to have a negative effect to activate. That's pretty big, actually. Because, especially if your tank is a Warden, they're already automatically cleansing anything that can be cleansed on them. Which means that Cleansing Ritual isn't a synergy they can grab right now. This means they can. Rune Focus has a longer duration, no longer grants you an additional armor when standing in them, but heals you for max health every second while inside. That's interesting. Probably better for tanks. Channeled Focus, which is the Magicka morph, now increases the duration of the ability and continues to rank up in duration. Restoring Focus now increases your healing done by 25% and ranks up by 1.1% rather than duration. Black. Increase the stamina restored. Reduce the base cost. 2 stamina might save your life one day, just maybe. It won't. I can guarantee you that's not going to happen. Arctic Wind now heals less. Toxic Barrage had an issue fixed. Elemental Storm, where it had an issue fixed where its ability and its morphs were not considered weapon abilities. That's good, because we need that to be good. Impulse got fixed. Wall of Elements fixed an issue where some of these abilities were incorrectly labeled as other versions. That's hilarious. That's actually really funny. Deadly Cloak now deals double damage instead of doubling the tick rate. This results in about a 9% damage increase, but will require you to stick to your target more and has less of a chance to proc other effects. Lacerate fixed an issue where this and its morphs were not considered weapon damage. Bloodthirst is now always considered, and Blood Craze, their heals are now considered dual-wield abilities. And the Twin Blade and Blunt passive for axes got buffed. Or changed, I guess. Huh. I thought it was already... I thought it was already crit damage by 3-6%. Maybe I'm wrong. Invasion got changed. Blessing and Protection. These are both really good because we use this a lot. This only matters if you're playing a Nightblade healer, which... Okay. But this is nice. This means we can actually get that combat prayer on the party. Pancreas isn't run a ton. But it's worth noting. Ward Ally... Which morph is that? I don't know the shield one as well. Cast 2 shields instead of 1 with 1 shield always on yourself. Fix an issue where the ally targeting shield was not considered a resto staff ability. What wasn't considered then? I'm sorry. Brawler now gives a bigger shield. Because clearly Brawler needed a buff. It was already one of the best stam soloing skills in the game. Clearly it needed more. Crit damage increase rather than crit percent. Versalize, the AoE is now considered a two-handed weapon ability. Rally, with the initial cast was not considered a heal, made numerous improvements to its stacking heal to reduce cases where the bonus of the heal would remain or be lost in cases where it shouldn't. Undeath now works on ground-based abilities. That should have been a thing already. Undaunted has been changed a bit. Or Necrotic Orb specifically. Now ticks once every second rather than every half second. Increase damage per tick and decrease the travel time so it's easier to land multiple ticks on lower mobility. Overall DPS lost, getting these abilities closer to other AoE dots in power. Probably be stronger than other dots. That's interesting. I think that's worth thinking about, yeah. I think we still run Necrotic Orb. I think we still run Mystic Orbs. Here's the healing per tick of this morph by 38%. This will result in less total healing, but still be stronger than most other AoE HOTS due to its mobile nature. Yeah, okay. I don't have complaints about this. Necrotic Orb has kind of been top tier for everything since I started playing the game. I'm okay with them trying to put Necrotic Orb more in line with other heal over time and damage over time abilities. And increase the damage per tick of Caltrops by approximately 36%. It now deals damage equal to a normal dot. Frabbed you his day! Caltrops are decent again! Reduce the maximum stages for some of the passive non-slotteds. Lower the vertical progression cap to 1560 rather than 21,000, and 1626 rather than 2352 in finesse. So this is a nerf to the. This is lowering the cap, the height at which you need to get to be at the quote unquote best possible stars. Which I think is decent. Bashing Brutality, Defiance, Hasty, Hero's Vigor, Sprinter, and Tireless Guardian all got nerfed. This is, I think, the only one I care about in that list. Fortification's pretty good. Savage Defense is decent. Tumbling's decent. I don't remember what either of those do. This is the only one I'm really kind of sad to see get dropped down. These are all slotted stars, so... Overhealing yourself or an ally against them health, magic, and stamina recovery equal to 0.5% of your max magicka for 6 seconds, up to 150. This is actually probably worth slotting on a healer. For the same reason we run Spell Power Cure over Olarime in some fights. This might actually be better for more mobile fights. I think this is worth considering buying. From the brink, healing yourself or a target under 25% health grants them a damage shield that absorbs 2,000 health per stage for 6 seconds, 30-second cooldowns per target, 5-stage max at 10 points per stage. I don't know about this one, honestly. Hope Infusion's actually pretty decent. Healing yourself or an ally under 50% grants them minor heroism. Duration is based on your mag recovery, granting 1 second every 300 recovery. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds per target, single stage with 50 points. Decent, not great. Direct damage buff. When you remove a negative effect from yourself or an ally, you heal them and allies within an 8-meter radius for up to 1,280 health per stage. Heal when you cleanse isn't bad. Not great either. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about Self. Weapon Expert, increase your damage by light or heavies. That might be worth it. Blast, Eldritch Insight, Elemental Defender, Hardy, Piercing, Precision, Preparation, Quick Recovery, and Tireless Discipline have all been dropped down to 2 stages from 4. This is going to change how this entire patch plays. And I don't know if it's going to work better or not. We'll have to see. We'll have to play with it. We might be doing less damage, taking less damage, and doing less healing. This might slow down the entire game. I don't know. We'll have to see. Okay. Several item sets to state that they require melee damage to better describe their requirements. Okay, so melee damage, and we were talking about this earlier with the Diamond's Victory set. Melee damage is less than or equal to 7 meters, which means that the Dragon Knight thing I was talking about still works because your maximum melee range is 7 meters. These sets now proc off taking any melee damage rather than only Martial, Death's Wind, Dragon's Defilement, and Night Terror. Dragons is, I think, the big one that's good there. Item sets that proc events that deal damage or heal now scale similarly to abilities based on specific stats, which will now be called out in the tooltips. Check each section to see what sets scale with what. These following scaling methods are currently available. Guys, this is weird. This is a very weird change. So, first off, damage procs now scale from your highest weapon or spell damage, which you need 5,478 weapon or spell damage to reach the original value for many sets, which is probably reachable, I think. I'm not positive on that. I'll have to ask. Healing now scales with your highest max magicka or stamina. 35 is definitely doable. I can tell you that right now. That's actually not that uncommon for me to hit on my healer. Tanking sets scale either your max health, and in some rare cases will use the higher of your physical or spell. 38,035 max health, or 27,890 physical or spell resist. We can do that easy on tanks. Cool. Following sets now scale off your weapon or spell damage, whichever is higher. Frenzied Momentum, Merciless Charge, Wild Impulse, Wrath of Elements. Wrath of Elements can be purged? No, don't wait, did Wrath of Elements need nerfing? I don't know, we don't know anything about Cyrodiil right now, proc sets on Cyrodiil right now because none of them work. Okay, Frenzied Momentum's damage now scales off of it. Merciless Charge now scales off of it. Wild Impulse and Wrath of Elements. Wrath of Elements being purged, I don't think that matters. Puncturing Remedy scales off max health, thank you, thank goodness. Increase the magicka on proc for this set up. Okay, precise regen got buffed, that's good. Sets now scale off weapon or spell damage, Ashen Grip, Cold Harbor's Favor, Legacy of Karth. They buffed Legacy of Karth, guys! They buffed it! It might actually be good now. Probably not. But this might actually make it worthwhile. Legacy of Karth, Mort Cullen, Oblivion's Foe, and Song of Lame. This is a very long list of buffs. That's worth noting. Following sets now scale off of Max Magic or Stamina, whichever is higher. Cold Harbor's Favorite and Dragon's Appetite Healing now has a half-second cooldown instead of 1. Heal now count has a 5-second cooldown instead of 10. Nocturnal's Favor, Redistributor, Shallowdoor's Curse, and Vampire's Kiss. Okay, nothing really interesting there. Noble's Conquest scales off max health. Maximum stamina granted up. Vampire's Kiss got changed. Weapon and spell damage addition. What's Vampire's Kiss currently? It's base game. Health recovery, max health healing kit. When you kill an enemy, you heal for 8,000. Max stamina, max magicka, max stamina, and magicka. Weapon and spell damage in addition to its on-kill healing. This is not terrible now. This actually might be a decent set to play with. I don't think it's as good as some of the higher-up sets, but I think that depending on what the value for this is, this could actually be good. Dungeons and Arena, Aegis Caller, Auroran's Thunder, Azure Blight, Kalurandun's Dolamesh, Flame Blossom, Icy Conjurer, Overwhelming Surge, Pestilent Host, Pillar of Nirn, now does bleed damage on the initial hit. And Flame Blossom also can now be used by multiple players against the same target, which seems mean. Flag Singer, Savage Werewolf, Scavenging Demise, Sheer Venom, Sunder Flame, Ice Furnished, Unleashed Terror, Viper Sting, Widowmaker, and Winterborn all scale off your weapon and spell damage, whichever is higher. And reminder that we need a lot of that to get there. And I don't know what we're averaging at. Following sets now scale off your max magic or stamina. Draugr's Rest now takes and also takes every 2 seconds. Heady's Hearth. And the heal from Oblivion's Edge. That's interesting. I don't think that's enough to put Oblivion's Edge back on the map, but that's certainly interesting. This is a set that will definitely be coming up in the future, because it's one of those sets that I want to talk about, but don't really know if it's good, if it makes the cut. Following now, scale off your max health, Crimson Twilight, Frozen Watcher, and Leeching Plate. Alright, that's pretty decent. Following skills off your physical or spell resist, whichever is higher. Ember Shield, Explosive Rebuke, and Hand of Mephala. What does Hand do? Hand of Mephala. When you take damage, you encase the ground beneath you in webs, reducing movement speed and applying minor breach. Web bursts into venom, dealing poison damage. So that scales off of your physical or spell resist. That's okay. Amber Plasm reduces your health, magicka, and stamina recovery granted. Archer's Mind increases the base damage from 8% and increases the bonus while sneaking or invisible to 16. Blood Drinker is now down to 20%, now that more abilities deal bleed damage. This makes me sad. I really wanted them to not think of this and just mess around and just be able to do stupid stuff with Blood Drinker. But nope, they thought of it. They thought of it and reduced and stole my fun. Bone Pirate's Tatters now grants less. Elemental Catalyst. They buffed Elemental Catalyst! They buffed Catalyst back. Catalyst is now can give up to 15% bonus crit. That's pretty big, actually. Kraglin's got... not Kraglin's. Hollowfang got nerfed in the amount it restores. Kraglin's got fixed. Shroud of the Lich is still not got fixed, but not in a way that makes it good enough. So increase your magicka recovery granted by 1,106 up. that the number change isn't going to fix Shroud. This isn't the magic of recovery it grants is not the number you have to fix for Shroud of the Lich. That's not the thing you have to fix here. This timer is what you have to fix to make Shroud of the Lich good. Alright, monsters. Now scale off whichever is higher. Damahouse, Grothdar, Iceheart, and Alambris. Set now procs both at once rather than one or the other. That's interesting. So, I wonder if it will deal roughly the same amount of damage if you were getting both. Or not. Infernal Guardian has now scales. Nightmare. I don't know that set. Oh, is that the... Kjeldin's Nightmare. It's the Unhallowed Grave. Light attacks, put a bone stack. 5 stacks, an undodgeable skeletal hand attacks your enemy after a second, knocking them into the air and stunning them, or dealing a ton of magic damage if they cannot be stunned. An enemy that has reached 5 stacks cannot gain bone stacks. Okay, so that's a... This is a PvP set. Kragath's now lasts longer and has a longer cooldown. Mob the Infernal's damage now scales. Fiery Breath now lasts 3 seconds, but ticks once every second. Narayaneth, Selene, Celestrix, Spawn, Stonehusk, Stormfist, Valken, Veladrith, and Zaan's damage now all scale. Following sets now scale off your max Magicka or Stamina. Chokethorn, Earthgore, and Nightflame. They killed Earthgore, guys. This is less good on tanks now. Because they don't tend to have as much... They're going to not tend to have the same crazy high max Magicka that you will on a healer. I wonder if Earthgore's still worth it. Maybe, maybe not. Lady Thorn, Scourge Harvest, Shadowrend, and Thor Vulcan now scale off max health. Physical and spell tremor skills. Damage now scales off your physical or spell resist. This is good for stam groups. Marsalak now procs off of heavy attacks, has increased cooldown, reduced the bonus scaling per negative effect, and now scales off your weapon damage. Interesting. That means that Marsalak is now... How do you spell Marsalak? A-A-R. So it's now when you heavy attack an enemy, you spew a cone of corruption, dealing disease damage to enemies over 4 seconds. It's increased by 5% for each negative effect, up to 150%, and can occur every 7 seconds. So it's now... deals less bonus damage, but per negative effect on them by 2% down from 5, but removes the cap. So theoretically, if there's a ton of things on them, you can get a ton of damage from this. But I don't know. I still think that this is worse than a lot of other monster sets we have access to. Mythics, Bloodlords gives more Magicka. I don't know that matters. Malakath's band now increases your damage done by 16%, but reduces your critical damage done by 50, rather than 25, but makes you unable to crit. That's pretty... That, honestly, I don't think that changes what Malakath's does. I think it just fills its niche better. Which I'm okay with. Making Malakath's a little bit better is interesting, and I think it opens up a little bit more design space. Moving right along, we have Ring of the Pale Order, which is interesting. Increase the amount of healing done by 20%, up from 18. Okay, the set now loses 4% of its value per group member. This means if you are alone, it will stay at 20%, but reduced to 8% if you are in a group with 3 other players, and 0% with 5 or more, and remove the heal cap. Okay, this is a solo ring and a solo ring only now. Cool! Zos, good to see where you stand on the Ring of the Pale Order. I think this is a good change. I think. I'm not sure, but I think this is a good change. It's now basically, it means that it's now basically useless in trials, but I honestly think that's okay. It's down to 8% in dungeons, and it does nothing in trials. All it now does in trials is make it so that your healers can't heal you. I think that this will kill a couple of people the first day it gets released, because people will forget to take off their Pale Order and just no longer be healing themselves in trials, and it'll be fun to watch! Alright, Overland sets that now scale off your weapon and spell damage: Defiler, Mad Tinkerer, Night Terror, Shadow of Red Mountain, Storm Knight, Silvara's Scale, Thunderbug's Carapace, Twin Sisters, Unfathomable Darkness, Venomous Smite, and Way of Fire. This might affect whether or not how good of a review these sets get on Left of Meta, depending on just how much this ends up affecting the damage they deal. Following sets now scale off of Max Magic or Stamina: Briarheart, Draugr's Heritage, Train of Max Valor, and Winter's Respite, which now ticks every 2 seconds instead of 1. Bahara's Curse and Grace of Gloom now scale off of max health. That's very interesting. Okay. Item Mora have skills off physical and spell resist. Oh my gosh. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, this is a meme set. So what this set does is when you roll through an enemy, you deal a ton of physical damage and knock them down. It's very fun, but it's not a strong set. I ran it for a while on a DPS as weapons and jewelry and just charged people and then rolled through them to knock them down, and it was a very fun set to play. It's not that great, but it's fun. And it now scales off your physical and spell resist, so you need like tank levels of resistances to make it the same. Bloodthorn's Touch, reduced max resource. Bright Throats, reduce the magic of recovery. Eternal Vigor, no longer grants a line of max health while wearing fine pieces. Ugh. Prisoner's Rags, got nerfed. Affliction, Galarian's Revenge, Phoenix, Vice Cannon, and Fish's Death now all scale off of your weapon or spell damage, whichever is higher. Okay. Following sets now scale off max magic or stamina. Alexia's Mercy. Italian Defender, Crest of Cyrodiil, and Juggernaut now scale off of max health. Okay. We were only basically using those on tanks anyways. Through the Harbinger. Reduce the damage scaling down. No, don't hurt my throws. What did they do to you? Increase Vengeful Leech stuff. Meh. Reliquin, Destructive Mage, Poisonous Serpent, and Roar of Alkosh now scale off your weapon and spell damage. They're trying really hard to take Alkosh off of tanks. They're trying so hard. I don't know if this will do it. I don't know if this will do it or not, but it might. This might be the thing that actually kills Alkosh for tanks. Which means Stam DPS really need to find more pen. They might need to start wearing pen sets. I don't know how to feel about that. Twilight Remedy now scales off of max magic or stamina. Defending and Eternal now scale off of max health. And I think that is the only things this thing that we need to talk about. So yeah, this is a bit of a longer video. Hopefully I can get it edited quickly so that I can get it up within the next day or so. But that is, I think, everything we needed to talk about. Oh, we need to talk about the new monster masks. Because they added 3 new monster masks. Short version, Bring these to PvP stuff. That's about all they're good for. Bring these to PvP. This might be interesting as a tank thing in PvE, but bring these for PvP. None of these are going to be all that. None of these do enough for PvE content. But we have more monster sets. And they're non-undaunted ones. So that's interesting. I don't think any of them are good. At least not for PvE. But that'll about do it. Thank all of you for watching. I hope to see you next time. Thank you for putting up with this more rambly first impression style video. Until next time, good luck, have fun, and don't die.